Dehi nityamavadhyoyam Dehe sarvasya bharata Tasmat sarvani bhutani Natvam shochitum arhasi.
O Bharata, this, the indweller in all bodies, can never be killed. Hence, you should not mourn for any being. Now, in this verse, he is merely summarizing. Verses 11 to 25, he gave the highest philosophy. We got a taste of that yesterday. And if only you had opened your heart out to it, the thought would have remained with you these 24 hours. And what a difference it makes to our life. 26 to 29, he gives the layman's version. Okay, you're not able to understand the high philosophy. But even from your standpoint, if you accept that every living being born must die and every person who is dead will have a birth, and that this cycle of birth and death goes on all the time, not just with living beings, with objects, everything in the world passes. So if you make a correct assessment of the world and accept it for what it is, when must you do that? At birth. At birth, or at the start of a relationship, you must understand that someday it will break. It has to. It has to come to an end. And so you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't sell your soul to anything in the world. And then you're protected. So here he is just summarizing. Tasmat, therefore, you should not mourn once you know that the indweller in all beings. Now, who is this indweller? Before that, what you need to understand is, the moment you look at anything from a selfish standpoint, from a personal standpoint, when you say, what will happen to me? And if that's all that you're interested in, you are just positioning yourself for unhappiness, and you get it, plenty. You're asking for it, you get it. No selfish person anywhere in the world at any period of time has been happy. And yet, foolish that we are, we're following in the same pattern. By the same token, no unselfish person is unhappy. And when you rise to the state of selflessness, where this thought of self is removed completely, 100%, you reach the state of enlightenment, you experience infinite bliss. What is this infinite bliss? You achieve that state of completeness, wholeness, where you don't experience an emptiness at all. You don't experience a void in your personality. You're what they call as paripurna, totally self-sufficient. There's nothing in the world that you want. That is the state of infinite bliss. When you have the courage of your conviction to say no to anything that the world offers. And the interesting thing is, the more you say no to the world, the larger the offer that comes from the world. So, that's what it is. So therefore, get the taste, feel the joy of service. You can start exactly where you are, wherever you are. As you are, where you are, you can just shift your attitude to that of service. As the Gita says in the 4th chapter, there are 4 ways of doing service. One is dravya yajna. You write out a check, give a donation, give money. That, he says, is the lowest level of service that you can give. And now we are struggling even to do that. Slightly better than that is tapo yajna, where you offer your services, your expertise. You say, this is what I'm capable of, let me give back to society. How many of us ever think, when does that thought ever cross your mind, that maybe you ought to do service? Now this corporate social responsibility, CSR, has become something to talk about. Hardly anyone really feels it, and therefore no corporate body is really doing service. Very few. Then comes yoga yajna. So, yoga yajna is giving knowledge. As the saying goes, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but you teach him how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. I'm not asking you to give fish to anyone, but just give someone knowledge, give someone expertise, train somebody. Yoga yajna is give spiritual knowledge. That's why we've been saying. In fact, what we are saying is, we are offering you books and CDs, so please take them and give them as gifts. To your loved ones, to your friends, to anyone. Standard Chartered Bank one day picked up 250 books and gave them to their customers or whoever. So, the highest piece of service that you can do to anyone in the world is Svadhyaya Jnana Yajna. Just go home, gain knowledge, transform your personality, grow into a towering human being, and that is the only service that you need to do, which is tap into your spiritual assets. So, on behalf of our organization, we are offering you the opportunity to do all four, whatever you want to do, preferably all four. See, as you go up, you do the lower as well as the higher. And so your entire personality becomes one of service. That is why we said, even when Sudama was sent on a mission to ask, his first thought was, how can I go empty-handed to Krishna? And mind you, Krishna was a king, enjoying himself in the palace in Dwarka. Sudama was a pauper. So it has nothing to do with what you have or don't have. It's a mindset. It's an attitude. Taste the joy of service, and then you'll never go back to selfish living. It's like getting out of a slum. You will never, not even at death point, want to go back to the slum. Dehi, he says, Dehi is indweller, the occupant of the Deha. Who is the occupant of the body? Subtle body and causal body, your mind, the realm of emotions, feelings, the intellect, analysis, discrimination, and vasanas, the causal body. These are the occupants of the Deha. So is Atman an occupant of Deha? So when he says this, the indweller in all bodies can never be killed, he means not just Atman, he means even your inner personality cannot be killed. It's only the physical body, and that too, the physical body is never killed by anybody else. Not by a disease, not by germs or viruses. You discard the body that is of no use to you anymore and take on a fresh body. So, as we saw yesterday, until such time as your prarabdha vasanas are not exhausted, death cannot come to you. But if your prarabdha vasanas are exhausted, sitting here one could just pass on. So all death is, all movement in fact is self-determined, death is also self-determined. It's like your son wants to go and study in the United States. For all practical purposes, he has moved entirely from Mumbai to maybe New York or Boston. He has gone of his own volition. It's his choice to go there. He has gone because he feels he will be better off there. And you are sitting here crying. In death, you don't know where the person has gone, and it is this ignorance that makes you weep. It's the attachment that makes you mourn. And that's what he's saying. You rise above it. Once you know that it can never be killed, you should not mourn for any being. So, what must you do? See, the nature of the mind is to get attached. It gets entangled. It gets caught up with whatever you do, wherever you go. You know, we were in Vizag for 4 days. On the last day, so many people came and said, it was so wonderful coming and listening to these lectures. Now, tomorrow I won't know what to do with myself in the evening. So what has happened? The mind has got attached. So what you need to do, and once you get attached, you establish wrong relationships, you mess up your relationships, everything goes astray. So the Gita offers us a way out, which is just leave your attachments as they are. Shift your focus to obligations. Once you live a life of obligation and you're objective about it, what is the objectivity? You don't make a big deal out of your obligation. Everyone has obligations. Every one of us is a bit player in the orchestra of life. You play your role to the best of your ability. The totality will take care of itself. So live a life of obligation. Then you're objective. What is objectivity? You know exactly how to deal with different kinds of people. As the saying goes, in Rome, do as the Romans do. So you meet a subtle person, you meet a highly sattvic individual, you can't talk to that person about stock market. You have to talk subtle things with that person. Non-thinker. A non-thinker is a person who doesn't think and is incapable of thinking. With that person, you can only talk about fashion, shopping, and food. You just have to give a slight trigger about food, you'll get a lecture. And then there are talkative people. You know, it's very interesting. There are people who come and say, I have a question. So they come and they give you a lecture. So they talk for 25 minutes. You can't interrupt them. You have to tell yourself, great, I got chutti. My vocal cords have got chutti. Sit there and listen very patiently to the person. And then at the end of 25 minutes, he has spoken, you haven't spoken a word. He leaves saying, thank you very much, my question is answered. It means he really doesn't want an answer. He just wanted somebody to bounce his ideas off. So that is objectivity. As far as you are concerned, the accent must be on karyam karma. What is it that I ought to do this moment? And every moment of your life, you just focus on what is it that I ought to do. Don't mess with what others should do. Don't mess around with the totality. That is not your mission in life. So for instance, nowadays, wherever you go, the hot topic is corruption, right? How are you solving the problem? By talking about corruption. What must you do? You live a life of values. You try and make yourself incorruptible. The totality will take care of itself. You know, when Gandhiji picked up the idea, the ideal of fighting for independence, he did not sit there and give lectures to people about the injustice that the British have committed or the wrong that the British have committed. He didn't talk about that. He just got up and did what he had to do. And by his sheer actions, he inspired millions of Indians to follow suit. And independence happened almost without their knowing it. I believe if you read books, you'll find out that right up to 1946, the independence movement leaders didn't in their wildest dreams think they will get independence so quickly. But they got it. And that's what you have to do. Fix an ideal, a goal for yourself. Just keep doing what you ought to do. The totality will take care of itself. But because you're messing around with the totality, because you're occupying your mind with what others should be doing or not doing, you are not doing what you ought to do. So the message is, Arjuna is not doing what he ought to do. All he had to do was fight a righteous war. He was a Kshatriya, the activity was his Swadharma, and very rarely do you get an opportunity falling in your lap. It's like, you want to join IIT, and you haven't even done any classes, nothing, just like that, you go do the JEE and you get admission. No? It's fallen in your lap. And then you say, no, I don't want it. When it is your swadharma, your interest. It's the biggest tragedy. So, once you live a life of obligation and objectivity, life becomes highly entertaining. Even when a person is nasty to you, you figure a way out of that situation. You know, Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl, he's written a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He's, as you probably know, a survivor of the one of the worst concentration camps during the Second World War. And he writes that the Germans not only tortured the prisoners physically, but the worst torture was mental. They would abuse you, they would say the vilest of things to you, and they'd break your spirit. That's how your spirit was broken, and that's why most of them died. So what he said is when someone abuses you, he moves on. He says nasty things to you, he moves on, nothing has happened to him. But you take it upon yourself, you allow it to fester, you nourish that negativity. And the moment you allow it to fester, it's like an infection, it destroys you. So what he did was, every time a German guard abused him, he says, what is he doing? He's just arranging the 26 letters of the alphabet in a particular way. It is my choice to rearrange them whichever way I want. And that's how he survived. So what he calls it attitude control. You pick up these two words, attitude control. When you go home this evening and your spouse gets irritated with you and says something nasty to you, remind yourself, 26 letters arranged in a particular way is all that he or she is saying. It's my choice to rearrange those letters differently so that I don't get upset. See, when he speaks from the absolute level, it's all right. You say, oh, Atman doesn't die. What have you understood? You haven't understood anything. But you bring it down to your level, and then it makes meaning. It makes a lot of sense. Next verse, 31.